شكرا دكتور دملولة من جامعة حمد بن خليفة من كلية القانون. والآن مع كلمة الدكتورة نوف السويدي من مشيرب العقارية.
Hi everyone. I suppose it's important to start with saying that a discussion on sustainability and energy is incomplete without talking about, especially in light of Qatar and the changes that the country is going through, without discussing economic diversification. As we're all aware, Qatar today is a resource-rich country. It still must invest heavily in various other industries and factions of society in order to maintain that it is sustainable beyond the lifetime of oil and gas. In line with the rentier-state model, states must implement the legislative and the regulatory changes in order to avoid the resource curse or in the Dutch disease. We can't ignore or disregard that the nation has set in place various policies and regulations in order to stimulate the growth of the economy and to avoid falling prey to the ills of the Dutch disease. Specifically, with regard to diversification, we're looking at here the economic, the social, and the political reform. In terms of the economic reform, the country has made all-encompassing efforts to diversify the economy and to implement policies in order to encourage the shift from a hydrocarbon-dependent economy to a knowledge-based economy. Qatar is the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, and it has the largest reserves of natural gas in the world. Qatar's nationals have the highest income per capita. The national vision aims to transform Qatar into an advanced country by 2030, capable of sustaining its own development and providing for a high standard of living for all its people for generations to come. Nevertheless, Qatar is still dependent on oil and gas, as it constitutes 80% of its exports of goods and services and 90% of its total fiscal revenues. With regard to economic reform, the QNV 2030 and the accompanying QNDS further clarifies how economic diversification can be achieved. The policy documents provides projections and general targets. It provides that it's necessary to migrate to a knowledge-based economy, and focusing on producing and sharing knowledge can add to economic prosperity and lead to boundless, sustained growth. Now, these two policy documents make repetitive references to the migration to a knowledge-based economy. However, these policy documents, one of the fundamental flaws of these policy documents are that they lack an operational strategy to achieve this ambitious objective. Qatar is determined through its policy documents that although there is a strategy, it lacks the sector-specific and the measurable objectives and the legislative and regulatory changes that the nation and its different entities have to abide by in order to diversify the economy and migrate to a knowledge-based economy. For Qatar to migrate and shift the economy to a knowledge-based economy, it has to go through and implement various changes. Some of these changes include developing a structured and coordinated efforts with the other relevant stakeholders in Qatar. For example, this can be done by establishing an entity to oversee the planning, the implementation, the monitoring, and by providing recommendation for this knowledge-based economy. So the growth of a specialized knowledge is an integral part of transforming Qatar. And by developing a regulatory entity, it would support this process in a systematic manner. With regard to the social reform, to achieve a diversified economy, the development of Qatar's human resources is fundamental. One of the aspects of the economic growth is through increasing labor quality and labor quantity. However, there's various hindrances to this growth, namely one of which is the naturalization legislation in Qatar. For a lot of people, experts, researchers coming from everywhere around the world, Qatar can never truly be home. It's a transitory state. This is one of the flaws of the system that we have in place. Even if we don't agree with the idea of granting all these individuals citizenships, we still have to find a way to retain the expertise somehow. In order to diversify the economy, Qatar must introduce reform in the form of legislative changes that accommodate for and encourage individuals with the capabilities to add value and to further stimulate the growth of the country. Qatar has made positive changes. It's in the midst of the crisis and the blockade by approving draft laws whereby permanent residents will be given certain priorities and treated more like Qatari nationals. However, there's still a lot that can be done in Qatar to retain the expertise and to further develop the economy in the long run. In terms of political stability, Qatar fares well in comparison to its counterparts in the MENA region. However, there are still ways to improve upon the politically in Qatar. For example, one of these ways is by having a vibrant and dynamic civil society. By having a dynamic and vibrant civil society, it will ensure that people have a platform to engage with society and to grant a venue to critique arbitrary action. A functioning civil society supports the decision-making process, and it provides a channel to maintain that decisions are not only occurring at a top-down level, but also at a bottom-up level. As such, in a concluding remark, although since the deployment of the Qatar National Vision and the development strategy, Qatar has witnessed staggering growth, nevertheless, this growth has not been sufficient to overcome its heavy reliance on oil and gas revenues. To achieve sustainable development and economic prosperity, the country must diversify the economy, and this can be attained by reforming the economy in three main ways, which are the economic, social, and the political reform. The economic diversification and economic reform can't occur in a vacuum. In order to achieve dynamic and sustainable economic diversification, it's important to introduce legislation that promotes and encourages this economic and social political reform. Thank you.